Hi, I'm Paul Rushworth-Brown, host of Down Under Interviews, History Bards, and Meet the Author in the US. And we are here with one of my all-time favourite authors, Catherine Hughes. Welcome to the show, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm very grateful that you're willing to host me a second time.
Yeah, you're a glutton for punishment.
I enjoy our conversations immensely.
Yeah, so Catherine's has had a very, very successful career. I don't think I can remember how many awards you've won with your previous novel, but you've written a new novel, Therein Lies the Pearl. Do you want to just give us a little synopsis about it?
Certainly. It takes place during the time leading up to the Norman Conquest, and it features the viewpoint of two women, which is a little bit unusual since most of the time their voices are not captured in the historical chronicles. One young lady is from Normandy, very simple, humble origins, and the other woman is historically known as eventually the Queen of Scotland. That's Margaret. She'll become the patron saint of Scotland. Their lives will intersect through a little espionage and intrigue. And even though they were supposed to be set up as enemies, because Celia, the Norman girl, is technically spying on her to keep Margaret in the convent and not in the arms of Malcolm III, who's the newly crowned King of Scotland, they defy all labels and eventually realize that they have much more in common than they had originally thought. And so the idea that they are on opposite sides or that there should be enemies sort of melts away as they get to know each other a little bit better.
Before the Norman conquest changed England forever, powerful forces were already shaping the fate of kingdoms. In the years leading up to 1066, lives were drawn into the dangerous orbit of royal courts, where loyalty was fragile and survival often depended on silence. Margaret of Wessex expected a quiet life of faith. Raised far from England, she never imagined she would one day stand at the centre of a kingdom struggling for power. But history rarely allows such quiet paths. At the same time, another woman, Celia, is drawn into a mission that could alter the course of events. In a court filled with secrets, alliances shift, trust is scarce, and every decision carries consequences. And across the Channel, William of Normandy waits. As England faces uncertainty, the choices of individuals, many of whom never sought power, will shape the future of a nation.
Increasingly, I feel that female authors use their craft to basically give females in history a voice. Was that really important to you?
It actually was, because I was thinking to myself, originally the whole idea of it came to me when I was in Edinburgh Castle at Margaret's Chapel. And I wanted to know from her perspective, what was the inside scoop as to why she decided to marry Malcolm. Now, I know what the history books will say. Some will paint it where she didn't have a choice. She had to marry him because she was obligated to, since he was rescuing her family. But I wanted to tinker with her, with her mind, really, and find out her point of view. And then Celia came along the rest of the way. But because we don't often hear their voices in the history books, and I thought it would just be vivifying for people today to get some insight into what were their dreams, what were their hopes, how did they operate in a world dominated by male power and still exert their own sense of power without a sword and without any weapons, and yet they were just as tenacious and just as formidable as the house girls that were fighting in Hastings.
Yeah, definitely. So, Catherine, you spent 30 years teaching literature in high school, I believe. I'm curious, did the teaching of great works of literature, did it make you more confident as a writer, or did it make the process more intimidating?
Definitely more intimidating. I mean, every day when I go into my classroom, I'm teaching these incredible works of literature with unbelievable prose and poetry. And so there was a lot of imposter syndrome working inside of me, even when I had the audacity to put the pen to the paper. even today, it doesn't have to be from the Western canon. Even today, when you pick up a novel from some of these incredible writers out there, you're afraid to consider yourself in their company.
Do you remember the time when you sort of said to yourself, I can do that?
I don't know if I've still arrived at that point. I think because there were a number of accolades attached to the first book, it gave me the courage to keep going.
Yeah.
And when I finished the first book, I had this sense of accomplishment that was not equal to anything else I had ever done. It was really a courageous and scary move.
Yeah.
And you know, as an author, when you put your words out there, you open yourself up to a lot of, you're very vulnerable is what I'm trying to say. So I don't know if I've really arrived at the point where I could say, oh, I've got it now.
Yeah.
I'm still fighting that idea that, I don't know if I'm ever going to equal them, but I also have to shed that. I also have to come back to say, you don't want to be like someone else. You have to tell the story that you need to tell in the method that you follow. And that's been a growth experience for me, for sure.
Yeah. I know a lot of people say to me, do you must read a lot. I say, no, the only books I read are mine.
That's funny because I'm the total opposite. I can't get my nose out of a book. I think I have 3 of them going right now in my room.
Okay, so many writers say historical fiction begins with a question rather than a story. What was the historical question that first pulled you into Therein Lies the Pearl?
Regard to her father. Her father, Edward the Exile, had lived on the continent. We think he was in Hungary for over 40 years. And basically had given up any attachment to England or any thought that he would be summoned back. And when he was summoned back, he landed on the shores of England, and within a week he was dead. And so that was a really big question for me, because I wanted to find out, what happened? Why would Edward the Confessor, he's going to die childless, why would he go to the trouble of bringing this man back if he didn't have plans for him to be the next king? So who would have been guilty of that kind of, murder? Who would have set him up? All the records show that Edward himself was of good health. There was no sign of any decline. He was not ill. He was a robust man at that point. And so someone had to have it out for him. And then, of course, the records will differ as to whom it might have been. In my perspective, I take a position and go with it. And I don't know if that is going to offend certain readers or if they'll find that is plausible. But that was the question. And then it becomes, working backwards from there, since I knew I wanted to deal with Margaret, what's going on with the family? What's going on now that they are fatherless and they are strangers in a strange land? What was that like for them to continue to live in a country that is hostile to them?
2 women shaped his life, a mother who refused to break and a wife who met every storm with courage. Their stories lived in the shadows until he finally stepped forward to tell them. A Letter Unwritten is the journey of a son looking back at sacrifice, at survival, at the quiet heroism of women the world rarely notices, that families never forget. From the trauma that marked his childhood to the fear of becoming the man he swore he'd never be, this is a story of confronting the past and finding the strength to choose a different path. Through his mother Jo's resilience and Bonnie's enduring love, Randy discovers that even the hardest stories can lead to healing, if someone is brave enough to speak them. A Letter Unwritten, the memoir that honours 2 extraordinary women and the son changed forever by their courage.
Your novel set in Normandy in 1064, just before one of the most pivotal events in English history. Mm-hmm. What drew you specifically to that moment in time?
Well, it was historically changing. It altered the landscape of England for forever. And there were so many interesting people vying for the throne at that point. You have Harold Hardrada, you've got Harold Godwinson, you've got William across the channel. And again, going back to your earlier question, everybody has looked at it from the perspective of the movers and shakers, the people that, are in positions of power. But what impact would that have had on someone like Margaret or someone like Celia, who is, just living her life in the outskirts of Caen and the outskirts of Normandy, and then winds up being caught in this web of intrigue and then can't extricate herself from it, because her sister is being held hostage with the idea that if Celia doesn't come through, that the sister's going to disappear. So the Norman Conquest, I think there's probably hundreds of thousands of books that have been written about the time, because it all depends on which side you're looking at it from, and for me to examine it from the perspective of a young Norman girl who doesn't want any part of this, and Margaret, who's unfortunately immersed in the middle of it, along with her brother, it made for some really great dialogue and background events that could infiltrate their daily lives. Even though they're doing, female things, they're not making decrees and they're not determining the outcomes of kingdoms, yet they're operating under that same kind of umbrella, which made it, I think, really interesting and hopefully engaging for the reader.
Yeah. So Celia is the protagonist. Do you want to tell us a little bit about her?
Sure. She was she developed later on, and she had to be a foil for Margaret. So initially, all of the historical records that I could find about Margaret were about her being so pious, so contemplative, so devoted to her faith that she was planning, her schedule was to be in the abbey or be in the convent for the rest of her life. So Celia had to be the character with a lot of pluck. She had to be the character with a lot of common sense. She had to be the survivor who was going to make it through whatever situation was handed her, whether she was in the outskirts of a battle, or she was in the middle of defending her sister, or she was nursing her father who had given up on life at a certain point. So Celia is that sort of explosive, secular firebrand who will always find a way to survive. And yet she's not going to sacrifice her own moral principles to do so. And so she's got this really strong set of values of what's right and what's wrong, and refuses to go against those things. So it was a real struggle for her to do this espionage, because number one, to pretend to be a nun for someone like her was outlandish. She didn't really want to have anything to do with her faith, and she didn't want to have anything to do with being in a convent and being contemplative and quiet or any of that stuff. But because it meant the life and death of her sister, she had to do what she had to do in order to make it happen. So she really, she kind of stole she stole a lot of the book until she could gain an appreciation that there's all different forms of strength. And that was one other aspect that I wanted to explore in the book. We all measure strength by warriors and who comes out of a battle on top, and who's able to, even in today, like who's going to win the game, who's going to win the soccer game or the football game or the basketball game. But while Celia is a fighter, Margaret is too, but she just does it in a very different manner. But she's just as strong and she's just as brave. And I think as I was writing and started to realize that, sort of tension between the two, it was a beautiful thing that's developed where Celia started to recognize that, she's very much like Celia in a different form. It's just, she expresses it in another manner.
Spirits of the deep wood, heed my call. Bring forth the blight that shall consume all.
In the shadow of Rome, Britannia burns. Kings chosen by the empire turn on one another, and a druid's curse is spoken into fire and blood. Bloodwolf and Raven will rise, not to save a kingdom, but to destroy it. Apollo's Raven, where myth, power, and forbidden love collide.
Because Margaret's, she's in a bit of a a 50-50 situation, isn't she? So, there's either the convent or marrying Malcolm. And Celia has to try and convince her to go the other way.
Right.
The convent.
Right. To stay in the convent. And Celia, Margaret, in my imagination, has a little bit of an interest in this man that comes from the north because they've been abandoned, because she and her brother and her sister and mother have no one at the court, unless you want to call King Edward in their corner, which he is, but he's so far removed from them. Yeah. So, she has that little tingle every now and then when they do cross paths, but ultimately she doesn't want any part of statesmanship. She doesn't want any part of power in that sense. And so Celia eventually does counsel her about where she can do the greatest good.
Yeah.
How many lives will you affect if you're in an abbey, as opposed to how many lives could you possibly impact if you're out and about in the world?
Yeah. So if William were watching this interview, who do you think he would say? What do you think he would say about the story you've written?
Now, obviously, there are other accounts that the wind wasn't right and they weren't quite ready, so that was the reason why they had delayed. But it couldn't have happened at a better time for him, to be landing in Pevensey Bay and Harold having to march all the way down from the north with his troops that are extremely tired. And that he's so headstrong, Harold, that he's going to fight no matter what. So I think William will forgive Celia for not necessarily sticking to the plan, mainly because it all works out in the end for him.
Yeah. Okay, so with Celia's mission, the moral tension, was that something you intentionally wanted readers to wrestle with?
The tension begins with Matilda, because I don't want the readers to hate Matilda. She operates within her own realm in such a way where she's a king. She is dominating that landscape for herself. And so Celia's problem is that she doesn't want to be separated from her sister, but essentially she's got to fulfill this obligation. Otherwise, she's never going to see that sister again. So I think Matilda opens up a whole new angle of what's happening behind the scenes that we wouldn't necessarily know of. And of course, it's all fiction, so it wouldn't be in any history book.
Do you think they would have faced moral issues differently to what we do today?
Oh, absolutely. Because survival was the primary instinct. And we take, we're struggling when we can't get to the shower, or we don't have a meal and 3 meals every day or something. And so I think there are ways to justify your behavior when you're faced with the prospect of life and death.
So 1066, a reader picks up your book and starts reading it in 1066, mind you.
Oh.
Do you think there'd be anything that they'd be shocked by with the way we interpret their world today?
I think it might shock them that Harold is portrayed the way he is. People who are living in 1066, I think that they would say, "Oh, how could she say that about him? We love him. We think he's great. He would have been a magnificent king if Hastings didn't happen. So that would probably be a deal breaker for half the population of 1066 for sure."
Spending so much time sort of like immersed in the in the 11th century, do you ever find yourself looking at modern life and thinking we haven't changed that much?
Yes, I do that a lot, because I think value sets don't change, because it doesn't matter if you're in a castle and you're on horseback and you're planning an invasion, or if you're in an office and a person can elevate himself by sabotaging a colleague. It's not, you don't necessarily have arrows and weapons with you, spears, but you're killing that person nonetheless.
When somebody reads Therein Lies the Pearl, what would you like to linger with them the most? Would it be sort of like the history, the characters, or the questions that the story raises?
Right. I would say I'd love for them to remember the characters, to remember that a person who can impact life might come in all different packages. And in terms of messages or themes, I would love for them to walk away from it and say that they feel invigorated at a different presentation of strength, maybe an underlying exposure of truth, and then a way in which to go about living for this day.
Okay, so Catherine, this is my favorite part of the interview, and what's going to happen is I'm going to ask you 10 quick-fire questions. Normans or Saxons?
Saxons.
If you could spend 1 week in any historical period, where would you go?
I would go Salem, Massachusetts.
Wow. Favorite historical novelist?
Ooh, Anya Seton.
Okay. Morning writing or late night writing?
Morning,
Coffee,
early.
tea, or something stronger?
I want to say something stronger, but I'll say tea.
One historical figure you would love to interview?
Oh, wow. I'd love to interview Elizabeth I of England.
Book or film adaptation?
Oh, wow. In terms of either one? Oh, I would go book all the way. I thought you meant, can I tell you a film that I liked that was from a book? But yes, book all the way.
Handwritten notes or laptop?
Handwritten.
Really?
Yes. Marble notebooks, handwritten, and then later transposed onto a computer. I love the feeling of a pen in my hands, and I love the crinkle of the page, and I love being able to draw lines and cross out and go over here and then deliberate over it.
See,
later.
I couldn't do that because my writing's so bad. By the time I went back to it, I wouldn't be able to read it.
I wouldn't be able to read it. Penmanship, yes. This Tender Land by William Kent Kruger. Okay. Beautiful.
If Therein Lies a Pearl became a film, where should it be shot?
Wow. Where should it be shot? Do we have any countryside that's still open and vacant? Maybe the hills of Northumbria. Maybe they're open and not settled too much.
I mean, it's very, very reasonably cheap to film in Australia. Maybe you could film it in Australia.
Imagine that. I have to convert the outback to the English coastline when the ships are coming in. Imagine that.
So, Catherine, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show again. It's always it's always a laugh when you come on the show, and I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, and I wish you the best of luck with your book. It's absolutely amazing.